Hey everyone, and welcome to the next episode of a More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. In this episode, we are going to be talking about how to structure your schedule using routines that help you to add in things that you want to do and things that you should do to help you create a life you love. Ultimately, we need to be intentional about how we spend our days because how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And the best way to be intentional about something is to create a schedule. But we don't want to just be legalistic about it. We want to be flexible. And so we're going to talk about how to do that today. How can we redeem our schedules to better glorify God? I'll give you some ideas to try, and then I'll share my own schedule with you at the end. Hope you'll join me today for this episode.
Welcome to a More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. We know that in the hectic hurry of everyday life, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters. This is a moment to pause and realign your focus on the one who gives us peace and rest. We're focusing on discipleship, productivity, and homemaking as we live with eternity in mind. This is the place where you'll learn to create a life you love and cultivate your heart for God. I'm Casey Fletcher. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 13 of a More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fletcher, and today we are talking a little bit more about how to create a life you love. We've been going through a series on the blog, and you can get all the printables and everything associated with it at amorebeautifullifecollective.com/AMBL shop. But as we've been thinking about this, one of the things that we've talked about is how we want to be intentional with our time to add in things that we love to do. Things like hobbies, which is what we talked about in the last episode. But I think a lot of us feel very rushed. We feel like we don't have time to do anything that we like to do. We're so caught up trying to just do the stuff that we know that we should do or need to do. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to structure our schedules so that we can actually create a life that we love living. One of my favorite parts of the day is in the quiet of morning. So I've always been a morning person, even as a little kid. They tell me stories how whenever I was, 3, 4, or 5 years old, I was like, okay, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed now. I was not one that was ever fighting sleep at the end of the day. And that has continued on through college and later. In the teen years, I was the person who woke up. I was the one that was like rushing down the stairs whenever I was still, I didn't drive myself to school. I was rushing down the stairs and I was saying, hey, you got to get up. We're going to be late for school. And then I had to get everything in the car, pack my own lunch and wait so that we wouldn't be late to get to school. And, even after, I went to college, I always would wake up early. Those 8 o'clock classes, they were not a struggle for me. And this has served me well through years, especially teaching. You start really early in the morning. So the morning to me has always been kind of quiet. And I actually like the fact that, whenever I would wake up, the house would be quiet. I would be the only one awake. And you would have these hours. It's almost like stolen hours where you get to, sit and read your book. And now I drink my coffee and, everything is just quiet. You think about the possibilities of the day and, you're planning for your day, maybe mulling over your to-do list, problem solving issues. And unlike, later in the day, sometimes I think in the evening, you can feel tired. Sometimes in the evening, I find myself thinking about all the problems that I had during the day, decompressing from the day. And that's not always a good thing. And also in the evening, I always find myself more likely to scroll mindlessly than in the morning. I feel like, no, I want to use this time and use it well. And so I'm more likely to pick up a book or, do my Bible reading or something like that. So my morning hours now are spent, with Bible, pen, and paper. They're spent with a book and a cup of coffee. And right before the sun comes up, and the rest of my house starts to wake up, I also have that, that quiet time where my kids are kind of coming out on their own. And as they each wake up, they come and kind of snuggle with me in the morning. And so it's just a quiet, peaceful time. And to me, I think the way that my mornings are is evidence of how a good routine can bring something life-giving and lovely to your life. Whenever I first started teaching, I needed to leave my house by about, 7:15 or so. because I had to drive about 30 minutes, and then I needed to be in my classroom around 8 o'clock, 7:45, 8 o'clock. And so for basically that whole first year, I'd roll out of my bed at 7 o'clock and I'd brush my hair, and I would, I'd pack my lunch the night before. So I'd throw my stuff in my bag and I'd walk out the door by 7:15. Some days I was a little bit later than that. And so then, then you're speeding and rushing down the highway to get to where you needed to go. But one thing that I noticed after I had my son is that, those early mornings, one, you can't just you don't have 15 minutes. Whenever you have kids, it's a production getting out the door. But it was just that I always felt rushed and like I never had any time to myself. Whenever you're single, or you're newly married, you might have that time at the end of the day. But I realized the value of mornings. And so I really focused on getting a solid morning routine, which took me, a little while to do. And now, even though I don't have to wake up early, I still really enjoy that morning routine. And it's become something life-giving because I've made sure that I've structured it. I've been intentional with it. And I've redeemed that time so that it's not me wasting it or me, just not even using it. Instead, I've taken something that I could just roll out of bed, or I could put on a show or something whenever I wake up first thing in the morning. Instead, I've taken something and I've redeemed it so that I'm able to use it to strengthen my walk with God and provide a little bit of, soul care in the morning. I think we often underestimate the way that our rhythms and routines impact our daily life. The outcome of our lives is the sum total of our habits. And whatever those habits are, that's going to be the direction of your life. So we have to think deeply about how we want those habits and routines, what we want them to be, how we want them to look like. When we work to develop spiritual disciplines like prayer and Bible reading, or any positive habit that helps us reach our goal, we recognize the importance of these, small, daily, quiet actions. It's nothing that somebody's going to be impressed by. Everybody kind of wakes up and drinks their coffee somehow, right? Or they wake up and they get ready for work somehow. But those small daily actions of doing something little while doing those daily things that you have to do, they add up over time. Where if you spend 10 minutes reading your Bible every morning, by the end of the year, you've spent a substantial amount of time. I think, if you spent 15 or 20 minutes a day, you would read through the whole Bible in a year. So it's important to see how we can redeem our schedules in order to best glorify God and redeem the time that we have on earth. When I transitioned to working home or being a stay-at-home mom after working for 5 years, I began to recognize the importance of this intentional schedule for my whole life. As with teaching, I had so much time that was dictated for me. There was not much that I could do, between 7 o'clock and 4 o'clock whenever I got home. But I recognized that now that I had all this self-directed time where I was like the boss of my own schedule, I needed to redeem this other time for God, just like I redeemed the mornings for God. And we're going to talk about how to do that today. For the past month or so on the podcast, we've been thinking deeply about how to create a life we love. So the first step that we have to do is we have to rightly order our desires. God has to be the thing that we love most, or everything else is going to be out of whack in our life. Then the second step is to figure out what we love. So figure out what hobbies you love, what are some of the things that bring joy to your life, and work to try to add more of that into your life. Again, if your first love is God, the other things that you love should also be good, holy, righteous things. So adding more of them into your life is just going to help you in your relationship with God. Then the step that we're going to focus on today is rightly ordering our schedules so that we can keep these two things that we know that we need to do, these first two steps in place, so that we can love God first, and so that we can add more of what we love into our lives. If our schedules are disordered, our loves are probably disordered. If our schedules are disordered because we work all the time, that probably means that we are elevating work over God. Or if our schedules are disordered because we look at our phone or watch Netflix all the time, we are probably loving entertainment and comfort over God. If our schedule is full of have-tos and drudgery, we're often going to feel like that's like the sum total of our lives. And we don't want that to be the sum total of our lives. Annie Dillard said in The Writing Life, "How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do with this hour and that one is what we are doing. A schedule defends from chaos and whim. It's a net for catching days. It is a scaffold on which a worker can stand and labor with both hands at sections of time. A schedule is a mock-up of reason and order, willed, faked, or so brought into being. It is a peace and a haven set into the wreck of time. It is a lifeboat on which you find yourself decades later still living." And I think that's so true. I talked about me creating my morning routine whenever my son, who's 4 now, he was just born. It is something that has become a lifeboat where I can tell whenever I was morning sick, I was like, is it really that important to wake up and do this? And I was like, this is missing from my life whenever I didn't. And so it becomes a lifeboat for you. And so I think the morning routine obviously is important, but there's so many other parts of our lives that could use this lifeboat, this scaffold, this thing that we fall back on that catches our days and redeems them, makes them worthwhile, makes them productive, makes them righteous. So our biblical principles for our schedule, we talked about this at the beginning of the year. We did a couple episodes on creating a schedule, an ideal schedule. And one of the things that we talked about were principles that apply really to anyone, but it's things that you want to keep in mind whenever you're developing your ideal schedule for your life. So the first thing that we want to keep in mind is that we work out of rest. In Jewish thought and in the way that they structured their weeks, the first day of the week was always the Sabbath. And so you would rest, and then from the overflow of your rest, you would work. So you're not working for the weekend. Instead, you are using the energy that you had from your rest to pour into your everyday life. So this means that we need to schedule time in our schedule for sleeping and Sabbath and also feasting and celebration. The second thing is that our ideal schedule, it should follow the cyclical pattern that we find in the Bible and that we find in nature. So we follow the cyclical pattern of the sun. So unless you work nights, you don't really have much control over that. But unless you work nights, you should probably have a time for sleeping at night. And then you wake up when the sun comes up. And then, you have that cyclical pattern of rest and work. That's based on the sun. You can also have some patterns in your life. We don't rely on them as much as people used to who are farmers, but with the seasons where winter is a time more for rest and kind of rejuvenation. And then summer is a time for work where you might do more, you might be a little bit more busy. And so we also have this with the Sabbath. So it's a cyclical pattern that we can easily discard and say, it's not important now because I could have the lights on and stay up, 24/7. I could, never sleep because I don't have to sleep because I always have light. I could always keep working. But we know if we do that, we will literally die. So we need to have that time built in our schedule where we build in this rest, both literally and also metaphorically. Our third thing is that our ideal schedule and routine should incorporate balance. So yes, rest is important, but rest and entertainment is not the only thing that we should do. We also need to make sure that we work and that we're productive with certain times in our day and our week. Feasting and celebration are important, but we also need to build in time of fasting and abstaining from things. So intentionally scheduling our time helps us to do this. And lastly, we should incorporate some elements of the church liturgical calendar and maybe the Jewish feast calendar into our ideal schedule. And we talked about that in episode 10 of this season on the podcast. We talked about the importance of the church calendar and kind of how to start adding that into our lives. So with these biblical principles in mind, we have to think about how we want to structure our days to allow for the things that we need to happen, to order our loves rightly, while incorporating the things that we love to do. So how can we do this? How can we do this and not feel short on time or like we've failed? I think a lot of us feel like with the schedule, if you try to do any kind of schedule, at some point it's going to get off track, and then you're going to be like, well, that was a waste of time, and now I'm not doing what I'm supposed to, and so everything that I planned for, I just got to throw out the window and just wing it. But the simple answer is there's always going to be more that you want to accomplish in a day, and there's always going to be things that come up that you didn't plan for. So you have to allow for space and flexibility in your schedule while incorporating certain things that help get you back on track. And so when we structure our days, I think it's helpful to think of rhythms. Now, people talk about like routines and rhythms of your day, but I want you to literally think about a rhythm. So whenever I taught in public school, I taught English, we always had a poetry unit. And so we would talk about the rhythm of a poem. And so often this would kind of involve us like clapping our hands and saying, okay, what is the beat of this poem? And we would talk about the beat of a song and how that applies to a poem. And, you know, kids, one of the poems that they always love to do is limericks, which limericks are fun. So I'm going to read you one, and I want you to think if you can hear the rhythm as I read it. There was an old man with a beard who said, it is just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nest in my beard. So yes, the rhyme is important in this song, but what makes it memorable is this beat, which if you do that enough time and you have 30 kids in a class, they're all clapping around with a song and kind of, you know, swaying like it's like a rap song or something. And it just makes you want to nod your head with the rhythm of the beat. Now, thinking about this, a good schedule should have the same idea as far as a rhythm, where you have order, but you have a cadence to your day. So there's structure to your day, but the structure comes through the cadence that you have. And what this allows you to do is it allows you just to have more of a flow to your day. Now, how do you accomplish a rhythm? Well, just like in that poem, if you were clapping, you would clap on the stressed beats of the poem, where the poem is there once was an old man with a beard. If you hear those things, there's unstressed syllables and there's stressed syllables. You would clap on the stressed syllables. Well, your day is going to have certain things as well. You're going to have unstressed parts of your day and stressed parts of your day. Now, don't get hung up on the fact that I'm using poetry terminology. Your stressed parts of the day are not going to be the parts of your day that are the most intense or that you're most stressed with. Instead, these would be the parts of the day that are what I call anchors, which is basically the times in your day that you're going to do no matter what. So anchors, they punctuate your time and they cue your mind to want to move on to the next task or the next thing. They can act as a way to get back on track, and they can also act as a cue of saying, okay, we finished this one routine, now we're moving on to the next. We're switching gears. I think this is so important. It's something that kickstarts your day. So what you want to have in your day is this rhythm punctuated by anchors that you are definitely going to do that cues your mind to start the next routine in your day. And this will be important for habit stacking and for making sure that you're accomplishing your goals. So some ideas for anchors. If you look at these aren't just for people who are, stay-at-home moms or retired or work at home. These can be for anybody. We all need anchors in our day, and we all need to establish a schedule. So, for the most part, your anchors are probably going to be related to everyday human functions. So they're not necessarily something like at 10 o'clock. You don't want to really use time-based schedules. You want to use anchor-based schedules, so there's a little bit more flexibility. So one, you wouldn't say at 10 o'clock unless you have to be at work maybe at 10 o'clock or something like that. You also wouldn't want it to be just some random thing. It should be something that you couldn't get away from doing. So like if you never go to the gym, you wouldn't say, when I go to the gym, I'm going to do a certain routine. That would be my anchor for the day if you're not in the habit of going to the gym, because then you never would do your anchor. So I'm going to give you some examples and you'll see what these anchors are. So the first one is getting out of bed. Unless you're sick or just had a baby or something, you will get out of bed. If you just had a baby, you're also going to be getting out of bed. So you will always be getting out of bed. So that's something that could be a great anchor. What do you do immediately after you get out of bed? Your morning coffee. I'm a coffee drinker. If you're not a coffee drinker, this would not be an anchor. But what is something that you do in the morning? Breakfast could be another one that could cue your mind to start the next routine. Leaving for work or arriving at work is definitely an anchor in your day. If you are a stay-at-home mom, it might be homeschooling or dropping the kids off at school. Lunch, coming home from work, or again, if you stay at home, maybe when your partner comes home from work, dinner, and then going to bed. So you see how these anchors in your day, it's you wake up, have your coffee, have breakfast, work, lunch, come home from work, dinner, bed. Like you can start to see how this creates a rhythm for your day, that these anchors, like you're gonna eat. Even if you are like intermittent fasting or something like that, you probably are still going to eat one meal a day. So even if you are only going to eat dinner, that could be an anchor. But if you're doing that, you probably are working or doing something else. So you can pick these anchors that create this rhythm for your day. The beauty of anchors is we do these things regardless of what life throws at us. And so because of that, they can act as course corrections for our day. So we may have every intention of, having a special morning where we go to the coffee shop and we read the Bible. But if that's the only time that we plan to read scripture, it probably won't happen because there's a lot of friction. You've made that thing, that habit that you want to do, you made it into an event where you have to get in the car, find people to watch your kids, find some time where you don't have work or other things that you have to do. And then you have to go through the whole process of sitting down in the coffee shop, quieting your mind, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of friction in that. And so it's a lot of effort to do that routine. Whereas if you said, no, what I'm going to do is every time that I drink my coffee, I'm going to open my Bible and read it. That is a lot less friction because you're going to drink your coffee every day and you're already doing something habitual, which is drinking your coffee, so you can add another habit onto that thing. So for any regular routine that you want to add to your day, you should choose one anchor in your life and you should add that routine to it. So a good schedule is going to allow for time to work and rest. It should be built on a combination of your schedule and your family's schedule. It should provide time to have free play, time to get chores done, some downtime. It should be a time that's probably going to be determined by the meals in your day, your school times or work times. And then again, if you're a stay-at-home mom, for me, one part of my day is definitely nap time. So that is also part of it. So, that would be where if you're working around your kids' schedule, there could be things that you work into your routine and your schedules based on that. So here are some ideas for rhythms and routines that you probably want to add into your life. So our anchors are basically just these points in the day that we're going to do every day. You don't really get around them. Now, I will say, quick caveat, I say every day. On Saturdays, maybe you're not going to work, not doing homeschool, whatever. Sundays is a special day. You might be going to church and hanging out with other people. So there are days of the week where maybe your schedule or your routine is different. And so the beauty of anchors is that it doesn't have to throw off all of your goals. Instead, you just make sure that you focus on consistently doing them on the days that you've planned to do them. So if you're going to do your schedule or your routines, you would do that every weekday. And then on the weekends, you would have a break. And that helps you feel like you're not like so bound up in this schedule and routine that you start to hate it. And it also it breathes some more flexibility into your life. The anchors, they act as a jumping off point for a larger rhythm of your day. So a combination of these anchors plus routines is what helps you make this strong rhythm-based schedule. So a routine is just a pre-planned set of habits that we do in a particular order. So it's just a type of habit stacking that you've thought through to accomplish what you want to do. We all have certain routines already attached to our anchors. You do things. Whenever I was in college, Netflix was just becoming a thing. And so we, basically everybody that I knew, whenever we ate lunch or whatever, dinner, if we weren't eating in like the actual meal, whatever it's called, the student union or whatever, we would always take our lunch back to our room. Everybody would get their computers. You put in your headphones and you would eat and you would watch a show. Like that was just a routine. It wasn't just me. It was like everybody would do this if they were in their room. And so that was a routine that we attached to our anchors. Regardless if it was good or not, that was just what we did. And I know even going into early marriage, I've talked about this before, that was one of the routines that we had at dinner time, where every time that we ate, we watched a show on Netflix while we were having dinner. And so I had to break that habit, that routine, and attach different habits to the anchor of dinner time in order to redeem that. If we're not careful, the routine is always kind of drift into this tendency, to chill out, kind of veg out, numb out, and you're not redeeming your time. You're doing the path of least resistance. So we have to intentionally plan our routines so that they accomplish what we want them to do. What do you want your dinner time to do? Especially if you have kids, you can use that time to disciple your kids and connect with your spouse and talk about big ideas, but you have to be intentional in order to accomplish that. Everybody has to be home at a time. The dinner has to be ready at that certain time. You have to make sure the kids are prepared to sit at the table. You have to make sure all of the devices are off. So that's why it's important to think about these schedules and routines. I know people that whenever they go to church, it's very easy to just rush off to church. We have like a 2-minute commute to our church, so we don't really get a lot of car time. But if you do have time in your car, that time in your car could be spent kind of being stressed and like, oh, we were late and not using it well. Or you could use that time to prepare your kids for worship. And then on the way home to kind of not decompress, but basically ask your kids what they learned that day and get some sticking power for those ideas and thoughts and things that they learned. Talk about the sermon, talk about their Sunday school classes. So you're going to go through these anchors and these routines in your life, but you want to make sure the routines are things that you've actually chosen to do and not just things that you're accepting as the way things are just because that's how you've been approaching that anchor in your life. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through some ideas of places where you can establish routines surrounding some of the anchors that we've already mentioned. Again, the anchors we've mentioned are meal times, work-related anchors, and then waking up and going to sleep. And so each of those anchors offer an opportunity for a routine. And what you can do is think about, okay, what do I want to do when in my day to accomplish the things that I want to do and redeem my time? So the first routine, which is the one that is most often talked about in any productivity circles, is your morning routine. So what is the first thing that you do in the morning? Often this determines the direction of your day. And so a good morning routine, it's going to include some of the following. And we might do an episode on this in the future. But basically a morning routine should have some spiritual disciplines, like Bible reading, prayer, worship, maybe some journaling and personal reflection. It may also include some planning, so checking your planner, figuring out your to-do list. It may include some exercise, and then also caring for your home, whether that's just throwing in a load of laundry or unloading your dishwasher, or just making sure that things are ready to go for the rest of your day. And so you can see how that morning routine, if you did that every day, you are making consistent gains in areas of your life that are important to you. The next routine is your evening routine. So what do you do at the end of your day? So the morning routine is definitely like the darling of productivity circles. But I think if your evening routine is slack, your morning routine is always just going to be you playing catch up. Whenever I go to bed and I'm like, I don't even care, I'm going to bed. And I just leave the kitchen a mess and, everything kind of undone. Anything that I wanted to get done in the evening, I don't do. Then in the morning, I'm focusing on doing that and not on getting ready for the day. So your evening routine is really what makes the next day so effective. So if you're staying up all night till, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you're probably not even waking up for the next day. Like you're never gonna have time to do your morning routine because probably the first thing that you have to do when you wake up is get ready and go to work. So I'm a morning person, and because of that, my evenings are always a little bit more challenging. It's always harder for me to find the energy at the end of the day to do the things that I need to do than in the morning. I can wake up and I can clean the kitchen and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I don't really want to do that. But again, doing my evening routine makes my mornings so much more enjoyable because I don't have to feel like I have to get up and clean the kitchen. So a great evening routine will probably begin with dinner. And it's going to involve dinner time, which is a time that you could use. People do family worship or family devotions at dinner time. It could offer some time for you to connect with your kids, maybe read aloud with your kids, or your husband could do that. It's also a good time to clean the kitchen, do a quick tidy of the house, and then you want to have some time to unwind. So, you might put the kids to bed after that, and then you have about an hour of time where you could do hobbies or watch a show or read a book. But part of dinner, I think the big struggle is making sure that you do your evening routine early enough to have time at the end of the day so that you have extra time to have for yourself. I know for us, like if we eat and it's 7:30, 8 o'clock, it's like the kids need to be in bed right now. And instead we're sitting down to eat. And so that just throws everything off and a lot of things don't get done. But other people would have other struggles. It could be that you're just so tired, you don't want to clean, but then again, that sets you up. So there's certain things that you'll need to work on as far as an evening routine goes. But whereas your morning routine is you are waking up and getting ready, preparing for the day, using it as a launching point, your evening routine should be kind of turning your focus. And so somehow you're turning your focus, you're decompressing, and you're turning to your home. Then we have our work routines. So with work, whether you work outside the home or you're inside the home, you need to have some way to change your mind, switch gears from home and family life to the task at hand and what has to be done with your job. And so if you work outside the home, that will probably involve, your commute to your job, and then maybe like whenever you get to the job. For whenever I was teaching, it was very easy. I wouldn't get there super early. Some teachers would. They would get there like an hour early and they would go through all of these different things to get ready for the day. But there were certain things that I would try to do as a routine that got me thinking about the day at hand. And that could be, writing the date on the board, going through the slides we were going to use, getting our worksheets and everything printed and ready to go. But you want to have that wherever you work. So if you work inside the home, if you're a stay-at-home mom, maybe your routine is to create a to-do list of what you need to get done that day. Or if you homeschool, it could be setting out your homeschool materials. Your work routine might be attached to breakfast if you work inside the home. Or again, it could be you arriving to your office if you work outside the home. One thing that I think would be a great way to change your focus from being like, oh, I just got to get this done, I got to get here, and kind of throwing every good thought from your morning routine out the door, is to pray, either with your family. I've read of some people that before their family leaves the house, they all circle up and they pray together, and the people go their separate ways to school or work or whatever. But doing some kind of prayer, maybe it was whenever you arrive to work, if you did that every day, it just sets the tone of your day and reminds you of why you're working and who you're working for. At midday, I think it's also important to have that moment to kind of pull away from your work for a second. And again, I would pray and use that time to refocus, especially if you've had a really busy day where you haven't really had a minute to yourself. When I was teaching, we had a 20-minute lunch, which I guess, for some people it's like, oh, I could eat in 20 minutes. But I remember it's like you had 20 minutes, and in that 20 minutes, you had to go to the bathroom, heat up your lunch, you had to make sure that you didn't pack something that required, 5 minutes or longer to heat up, because then, one, you're hogging the microwave, and two, there's no way you're gonna have enough time. But then, there was times where I was teaching and I was pumping, and so you're trying to eat and pump and get ready for the next lesson. And so it's just, there's no time. And so in those lunches, it's like you start to realize how that just kind of wears on you if you are always having that working lunch where you never really feel like you have a break. And so if you are in that situation where you have to live like that, think of how you could change your lunch schedule to create this pocket of time to rest, refocus, and get ready for the next part of your day. I've heard of people who, if they're homeschooling moms, one person said that, she would homeschool all day. So when her kids were old enough where they could do lunch on their own, she would actually do lunch in her bedroom, and she would use that time either to watch a show or like read a book. And so it was like her me time in the middle of the day where she would take 30 minutes as a break. And then generally in homeschooling worlds, you might school after lunch, but you're kind of switching gears for the next part of your day where your kids are doing more independent stuff. And so it kind of switches gears for you to say, okay, I'm going to do something else in this next part of the day. But you might feel like that too, as far as your job goes. If you have meetings in the morning and then independent work in the afternoon, that could be that anchor that kind of switches gears for you. And lastly, with your workday routines, you have your coming home routines. If you find that every day that you leave the office, like you're leaving stressed, and then you snap at your kids as soon as you walk in the door, what could you do to help not have that happen? How could you use your commute to calm yourself down? And so that's just something that maybe instead of listening to the news at the end of the day, you listen to a worship song. I always found myself, I would call my husband driving home from work, and that was like just a way to decompress and talk about the day before, I got home. There's just different things that you can do to switch your focus and kind of leave the workplace behind and then go home. If you are a stay-at-home mom, then it could be that this is the time where, you've done nap time, and so the kids are ready to go. You might put on a show, or if you do no screens, maybe you take them outside. You could use that time to tidy up the house. And then obviously you're going to be switching gears to get ready for the rest of the day, which means starting dinner. Homemaking and cleaning routines are something that we all deal with. All of us have to clean at some point in our lives. We all follow the pattern God set for us. He was the first homemaker. He created a home for us. And then now we continue to create homes. So it's not just, a stay-at-home mom job. It is something that we all do. We all are creating a home for us and our family. And so definitely homemaking is something that requires routines. And, even if it's something where maybe you're not necessarily in charge of everything in your house, you still have to take care of your car and your workplace office and your job area. And so all of us have things that we have to take care of. And so what routines do you have in place to make sure that you're keeping things organized and neat, where you can actually find the things that you need to use, and that the stuff that you have is like taken care of and not getting messed up and stuff like that. So homemaking is something that is important that we have to set up routines for. And so I have a series on the blog that goes into more homemaking routines and cleaning routines and things for your house, but this is something that we all could work on. Meal planning is another one. If we want our dinner time to be time to disciple other people, then we need to make sure that we are planning for those dinners, because dinner doesn't just magically get on the table. And so having a good meal planning and grocery shopping routine is important. That also will help you to cut down your budget costs, because meal planning will help your grocery budget go down and you won't eat out as much. And it also is so much healthier to cook at home than either buying convenience foods from the grocery store or eating out. You need to have routines for hobbies in your mother culture. So this is, hobbies would be things like we talked about in the last episode, like things that you do for your enjoyment. Mother culture is basically, even if you're not a mom, or your dad, you can think of it as father culture, but basically you're pursuing interests and you're diving into things that help your spiritual and intellectual growth. So what time do you make for reading in your life? How do you pursue things that you're interested in? What topics are you thinking about theologically? We've been going through our personal statement of faith. That is an example of developing your spiritual life. That is an example of mother culture. It's something that you want to know. And then also, the reason why we call it mother culture is in Charlotte Mason, it's something that you're able to teach to your kids or teach to the people that you want to have influence. So to be able to teach somebody, you have to know it yourself, which means you need to be investing in your own self in order to have that be the overflow of your life. And lastly, you need to set up some routines for your relationships. Justin Whitmore Early, he recommends having a deep conversation with a friend at least once a week. So that means that you have to have routines to get together with your friends. For him, it's a habit where I can't remember what day of the week it is, maybe Thursday or something. Every Thursday, his friends know we're getting together and we're hanging out and we're talking about life. And that is just something, it's a standing date in their calendar. So what habits and routines do you have to have time to spend with your friends? Also, you need to spend time, if you're married, to spend time with your spouse. I've heard of people say, you need to spend at least 1 hour a day with your spouse, just talking, hanging out. And then you need to have one date night a week or every other week. And then at least once every few months, you need to get away together alone with your spouse and have that time with them. Again, you have to have these routines because it's so easy to have, months gone by and you're like, we've just been like ships passing in the night where you just don't have that time with your spouse because life is so busy. And so you need to create routines and rhythms in your life for spending time with your friends and with your spouse, and also with your family. It could be your kids, so making sure dinner time is a great routine to make sure that you spend time with your kids if you work outside the home. But also like your extended family. Sunday dinner is a great way to do that. My family, most of them go to my church, and so because of that, we're able to see them regularly. And that routine is very life-giving, and it breeds more strong relationships with extended family. If we didn't have that, I would not be as close with them. So you have to think, okay, well, if your family doesn't go to your church, maybe if they live far away, how could you create a routine to connect with them? And that could be that you say, okay, once every other week, we're going to FaceTime everybody on one call. I guess you could use Zoom or something like that. And then that would be something that would at least help to create some closeness if you're not able to get together for like Sunday dinner. So all of this is that you're setting up habits that allow you to spend time with the people that you love. And it's, spending time with people is a great way to practice self-care in your life. Now, what if you get off track in your stay-at-home mom schedule or in your everyday life schedule? One of the things that is perfect about these anchors is that even when things come up, we have sick kids, we have to run an urgent errand, we have a doctor's appointment. If something gets in the way between us and our best intentions, you let your anchors bring you back. So you have all these routines and you've thought through them. You said, okay, this is how I'm going to connect with this person. It could be that, hey, this week you didn't get to your morning routine. Maybe you slept in and so it wasn't working. Maybe you're sick. Maybe your kids were up all night. Maybe you had an early appointment, but don't sweat it. So you have lunch, okay, after lunch, I'm going to do this and then have nap time and then I'm moving on. Then you just jump in with your routine and the next day you'll get to the habit that you missed the day before. So this is something that I've learned, and I told you before that I was going to share my schedule, and I recognized that from teaching, I had so much time dictated for me that I really had to be purposeful and intentional about the way that I am going to spend my time now. And so obviously schedules and routines, they ebb and flow with the school year and new babies and pregnancy, new jobs. And so this is the schedule that I have now. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be the one that I follow, but it's something that has provided that lifeboat for me in the busyness of life, where I'm able to still move forward and be productive and do the things that I want to do in life. Obviously, if you look at the schedule or listen to it, it's something that it's not necessarily something that I do every day. Like I said, on Sundays we go to church. So half the schedule I don't really follow at all. My son does school where it's a drop-off school that I go to every Tuesday. And so then that would be something that on that day, the schedule looks a little bit different. So it's something that I use as a guide, and each anchor can kind of cue me in, okay, this is what I'm doing next. But it doesn't happen every day, and that's okay. You want that flexibility in your schedule. So in the morning, I try to wake up and do my morning routine. Normally wake up between 5 and 6, and I make coffee, I unload my dishwasher, I start a little laundry, I read my Bible and I pray, and then I read a few chapters in like a heavier book that I'm reading, and I do my morning pages. And normally about halfway through, my kids will wake up, and so they'll kind of snuggle with me, and then they'll play while I'm doing all of those things. And then I also try to check my planner and create like a top 3. So you'll notice that I try to do a lot in the morning. Again, because I'm a morning person and I wake up, and honestly, like unloading my dishwasher and starting a load of laundry, that's a great way for me to wake up where like I can actually understand and read my Bible without like falling back asleep. So it's just a way to get me moving. But it also means that throughout the rest of the day, like that thing at least is done. One of the things I've heard about morning routines is if you did that morning routine, is enough getting done through that morning routine that you feel like if the whole day went haywire, you were good. And so that's a good question to ask yourself. What would you like to get done first thing in the morning? So you feel like, okay, check, that's done. For me too, another thing I do in this is I do my Duolingo. That's a good example of one. It's like where if you want to keep a streak going on something, whether that's running or reading your Bible or doing Duolingo, like how are you going to keep it going? Put it first thing in the morning. So if you do your morning routine, you've done what you needed to do, where it's not like, I missed it, and then you've broken your streak and everything's terrible. So at 8 a.m., we do our morning chores. So my son, I try to get him to feed the animals and get dressed. I get dressed. I try to get breakfast going. Recently, I heard a podcast that talks about taking 5 minutes to clean something in your bedroom so that your bedroom doesn't get neglected because you're focusing on the rest of the house. And that is something that I've been trying to do, and that's a good idea. Just 5 minutes of cleaning is normally enough for like one task, but it's moving the needle forward, which is what's important. Then after we do breakfast around 9, we do our homeschool. Right now I am using Memoria Press's Junior K curriculum. Again, my son, it's cottage school, so he goes one day a week, and then we do the rest of the schooling throughout the week. And that's been really great. He's really grown a lot. And so we do the writing part first, and then we do worship, catechism, recitation, which is just like memory facts. And then we finish by reading our Bible and a picture book or 2. So all of that, I mean, it takes about an hour. Sometimes he drags his feet a little bit, so it takes a little bit longer, and I have to kind of push him along as far as the writing part goes. But also he likes to draw and color, and then my daughter also does that as well. Sometimes we'll take a break about halfway through whenever we're finished with the writing part, and they'll play, and maybe I'll fold a little laundry or move the laundry over. And then we finish up all of that around 11:30, depending on how long they've kind of played or whatever. And then this is free play time. So if you are a stay-at-home mom, or even if you get home at the end of the day, you need to have time where kids just play by themselves. And if they're bored, they find something to do. Now, they'll make your house a wreck if you do it inside all the time. So you might want to take them outside to do this. Depending on the time of year, it was so hot in the summer, it was really hard to get outside. But now that the weather is beautiful in fall, we've been taking the kids outside to get our hours for the 1,000 hours challenge. So it's spending 1,000 hours outside in a year. So trying to go outside, get let off some steam before lunch. Then we come in for lunch. And then the next big thing is just nap time. So lunch is anywhere between 12 and 2. So we have some flexibility there. And then at 2, we do nap time. My daughter still naps. And so I'll rock her to sleep and I'll put her down. And then my son does quiet time, which anybody who works or stays at home, you need to do quiet time. You build in time in the day where the kids know they have to find something quiet to do. I would suggest keeping them in their room, but my 4-year-old won't stay in the room himself. So he likes to be wherever I'm at, like right beside me. And so there's been times where he's been in here while I'm recording the podcast in my bedroom. So he will follow me around, but he knows to be quiet, and he is quiet. And so I'm able to get some work done. So that's whenever I work on anything that I need to do normally, like on my computer. So podcast stuff or writing, and it gives me some time in the day. They normally wake up between 3 and 5, just depends on the day, what time it is. And after that, I tell them, you can't watch a show until after quiet time, unless it's a special day, like a Saturday or a day where they're, my husband's at home with them or something like that. And so doing that, one, they don't ask to watch shows in the morning time, but also it gives me some time once they wake up. If we don't want to go right outside, or if I want to finish up something or start dinner, we'll do a show then. And then we might go outside as well, depending on what time it is. We try to always eat around 6 p.m. and we try to always eat at the kitchen table. For a while, we did try to do family devotions because I was overambitious. So I think my son was 2 at the time. I don't know. He was like 2 or 3. And I got him a little Bible and he was reading through it. But now that we homeschool, I don't necessarily do family devotions at night anymore because we do our Bible reading and our worship in the morning with school time. But that is also a very good thing to do. And it's the time where, everybody's together. So if you have people in different places, doing some kind of family devotion at dinner time is great. Again, you could do read alouds, but just some time to make dinner something memorable and something more like an event. We do try to limit screen time at the table, which means, no phones. We don't have a TV in there. But honestly, the no phone rule obviously is for me and my husband. It's not for my kids because they don't have phones. But dinner is what you can imagine it would be with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. It's just a little bit chaotic, but it's a good time to connect. And then at 7 p.m., we do our evening routine, bedtime. We try to clean the house, try to do a quick tidy. That doesn't always happen. Definitely try to load the dishwasher and start it. If you could do anything at night, I'd recommend doing that, and then everything else you can just do later. And then we do books, pajamas, brush teeth, all that kind of stuff. And that gives me just a little bit of time at the end of the day to read or watch a show. Normally I like to read a little bit better than watch something, but it's football season now. So if there's any football on, that's what we're doing as well. So even though I told you a time, obviously that's just general. And you can see how it's punctuated by these anchors. Lots of things are happening in between, but it gives me some breathing time where if we've done all of our homeschool, I've cleaned what I'm going to clean that day in the house. It's not time to make dinner yet. I'm going to read my book, and I have some time built into the day to do the things that I love to do because I've structured my life that way. And you can do the same thing as well. Yes, you might have more time dictated by your work schedule, but how are you structuring your evening hours so you make sure that you have time to do what you need to do and also time to relax? I think sometimes we feel like we always have something that's undone in our lives. So whenever we're supposed to be relaxing, we don't, because we feel like we need to be up doing something, but then we never actually do it. So a schedule helps us to say, this is our time for doing things, and this is our time to relax. So it gives you permission, I guess, to relax and use that time. So what schedules, rhythms, and routines would you like to add to your life? Again, I think this is the way that we practice redeeming our time so that we can use it better. But we don't want to be so wedded to our schedule that we don't allow for God to work in our lives either. So obviously we don't want to be so legalistic with our time that if a need arises, we feel like, oh no, I can't do that thing because I am so focused on sticking to my anchor-based schedule. Your schedule is something that catches your days, make sure they don't all fall through the cracks, but it's also something that should breathe life into your days. And that is something that is so important. You can find our ideal schedule planner in the shop. You can also find all of our other Bible stories, Bible studies, and productivity resources in the shop as well. Don't forget to subscribe both to the blog and to the podcast. Until next time, I hope you keep creating a life you love and cultivating your heart for God. Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of a More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. If you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts to help others find the show. While you're there, you can like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out the blog and our store for more encouragement and resources on how to create a life you love and cultivate your heart for God. I'm Casey Fletcher, and I'll see you next week.